Hi, welcome to TargetTaunt. This is video number 2, showcasing all the new features like the tracker table you can see on the left, smart scanning of the room, filtering for important enemies, nameplate modification, floating marker on top of enemies you're in combat with, and so much more. If you're just here for the demo, don't worry, even this video will be quite long. Demo will start right away. After installing TargetTaunt, please type /TargetTaunt into your chat. That will show and unlock the UI elements. They can then be moved around, and after typing /TargetTaunt again, the position is saved and the UI elements are locked. You can see that the add-on now scans the room for important enemies and found a raider and a bulwark that are dangerous and need to be taunted by the tank. These small adds, foot soldier, frost mage, etc. are not dangerous, don't need to be taunted and therefore don't appear in the tracking table. The color of the enemies that need to be taunted is pink, which means they don't have taunt or are loose. When I go into combat and taunt, for example, the bulwark, the name will be green. After a while, green will change to yellow and then become red, followed by white flash, and pink again to indicate that the enemy is elusive. When taunting non-important enemies, like this soldier for example, the enemy also will appear in the table, but with a grey name and a grey background to indicate these are not important enemies. Please also note the arrow on top of each enemy. This indicates that this enemy is in combat with you and makes it easier to see from the distance. Okay, scanning the group for pink names like the bulwark makes it quite easy to keep track of all your taunts, and this will end the demo. I will now try to die and show you the menu. Thanks for looking into the demo. Here we go. Alright, opening settings, going to add-ons and then selecting TargetTaunt will present this interface to you. Role filters is the first point I would like to talk about. You can select the preferences for your role, tank, healer or DPS. On the tank I have retackle, that's the center tracker, and target list, that's the table. On healer and DPS I only prefer to have the target list, so the table, and while being solo I usually have both disabled, but for the sake of this video I have both enabled. Target filter is super important. You've seen in the beginning that the add-on scans room for important enemies and automatically put them into the tracking table. This is target scanning. If you turn that off, only targets you taunt will appear in the tracking table and there's no automatic scanning. I recommend have this turned on. The next I would turn that off. That's tracking of group member taunts. Every taunt done by a group member, even for small adds, gets put into your tracking table, and this can be overwhelming and usually is not necessary. Next is important targets. What is an important target in ESO? Well, ESO classifies enemies from easy to deadly. Easy are enemies that usually don't need to be taunted, like these small trash mobs. There's also non-categorized enemies, like for example chickens and whatever, target dummies by the way. And there's normal, hard and deadly. Normal is usually elite and need to be taunted. Hard and deadly gets into boss area. Normal is the default settings for raids and dungeons. This works quite well, but there are exceptions. For example, Lucent Citadel, third boss, they spawn very dangerous Atros. They need to be taunted by the tank at all times. They are very dangerous, but ESO classifies them for whatever reason as easy. When this is set to normal, they appear gray in your tracking table, which is hard to manage, and therefore we have this slider which promotes harmless enemies which have a high amount of health, for example 5 million or 2.5 million, to normal or to important. So a non-important enemy with a lot of health automatically gets promoted to normal. You can ignore harmless targets altogether, for example the small ads in the trash bag you've seen before. They will then not be put into your tracking table, or you can do the opposite and promote harmless targets to important all the time. I would recommend have both turned off. Retacker UI and Tracker UI are your two UI elements. I've set the font size of both of them to absolute maximum for the demo. Default is much smaller. Default is 24. For the demo I've 36. You can change the font style to whatever you like. Handwritten. Default is bold. And you can also change the weight. That's, for example, shadow or an outline. You can select how long the name should be. For example, make it way shorter if you, for example, taunt enemies with a very long name and your monitor is already quite full and crowded. You can shorten the name. Default is 24. And you can show a timer below the name or hide the timer. Draw tier and layer, please don't mess with that unless you know what you're doing. This is a draw tier and layer of the UI elements above other elements in the game. High and overlay is what I prefer to have because I find taunting quite important. But if you wish your tracking UI, for example, be behind your group window, you can then select another draw tier or draw layer. Talking about tracker UI, this is the second menu point of your UI interface and positioning. You can select the tracker background and the style of the background. Default important targets means every target that is important gets a colorful background, and non-important enemies are gray or whatever you choose for non-important enemies. If you decide to only have current target color highlighted, you can have that too, or you can disable colorful backgrounds altogether by set this to disabled. I prefer important targets. That makes it very easy to see if your taunt was successful and if there are still important enemies that need to be taunted. You can also set the background alpha to 0 if you prefer only text without background at all. Default is 0.7. And you can of course set the thickness of your edge from 0 to 4. There's another option that's kinda useful. Tracker grows upward, means the new taunts you do get stacked on top of the other. Default is from top to bottom. Please feel free to change the settings to whatever you like, whatever you need. Make the bar smaller, taller, wider, change the spacing. Font size, of course, default is 18 by the way for the tracking table. 24 is, as I said, to make the video more visible. And of course, why not, you can change font style and font weight for the tracking table too. And you can change how long the name will be. 24 is default. Draw tier and layer can also be changed, like in the center tracker, of course. Don't mess with that unless you know what you're doing. Floating marker. I've showed you in the demo how the arrow on top of the head of enemies you're in combat with looks like. There are 3 to choose from, and they get previewed or demoed right on top of the target name interface over here. Triangle, chevron, or the default made by famous Solinor. You can change how big the arrow is, enable a pulse if you like the pulse. I like it. Or you can disable this function altogether. Make one note, there are compatibility issues with other add-ons. Calling this specific RP by an add-on can get your game crashed. If there are many add-ons that mess with this very function in the game, your game will crash. I implemented many features that will absolutely prevent this. This add-on is so safe, it detects if there's another add-on, for example Untaunted or Content Helper, whatever, and then disables its own floating markers. You will get a notification in your chat box one time only that your floating markers are disabled because of there's another add-on messing with this RP. I implemented hooks that look for other add-ons all the time, so it's very safe to use. But if you get this text message that your floating markers have been disabled, please disable the floating marker feature in the other add-on like Untaunted or Marcos Content Helper, or even Fancy Action Bar, I guess, and then you can turn this on again. As I said, it's a safety feature and prevents the game from crashing. Nameplate settings. This is the nameplate on top of your enemy. Default size is 20 and default font is bold. You can see, let me move this away, you can see how the font on the enemies looks like, and if I go back to settings, add-ons, for example change this to handwritten and make it 28, the appearance is quite different. Choose whatever you like. This is an option you can ignore. It's only called one time when the add-on starts and will not mess with your game performance at all. Okay, warnings and animation. This is the last point, and it's quite a fun way to make sure you successfully taunted. First of three is feedback sound. When you successfully taunt an enemy, you get a sound like money changed. This is default. Enemy, every time you successfully taunt an enemy, you get this ching ching, and now your taunt was successful. You can enable this for harmless targets too. Default is off, so you can hear if you successfully taunted an important enemy. If you taunt but you don't get this ching ching, you know you missed. Visual animation. This is core for giving you feedback. This is the animation for the reticle or the center tracker, and you have this same animation in your table. Whenever you taunt, you get this animation on both lines, so it gives you an edge of the eye effect that your taunt was successful. You can make that very large or very subtle, and you can also change the timing or the duration, or turn this off altogether if you don't like it. And last point is boss warnings. You see at the moment there's shown 15.0 below the name of the target. This is the taunt remaining time. But whenever you lose taunt on a boss, this time will not only be 0, but also show no active taunt on a boss. You can disable this, but I find it useful. And same for taunt immunity. When you push your boss into taunt immunity, there will be a visible notification telling you boss is taunt immune. And last, color and global formatting. Uppercase in brackets. You can, when you taunt a boss, have its name in uppercase letters and put into brackets to make it more clear that you're looking at the boss. And you can change all colors in the add-on. For example, for your own taunts, this is the stepless gradient from green over yellow to red. You can change this in the color picker to whatever you like. Non-important harmless adds, default is gray, but choose whatever you like. And this is very useful whenever your taunt gets stolen by another tank. For example, the name in your center and the name in your tracking table, like shown here in the middle, gets a blue. You can change that to whatever you like. Two, of course, for example, yellow, whatever, but I kinda like blue. So it's very easy to see if your taunt gets stolen or your boss or whatever gets taunted by the off-tank on purpose. When you lose taunt or don't have an active taunt, default is pink. Change this to whatever you like. Okay, I think I've gone through every point in the menu. If there are any questions or wishes, bugs or whatever, please feel free to contact me by using the feedback button in the add-on or write a PM on ESO UI. Thank you very much and have a nice day. Bye bye, happy taunting.